Commitment under Pennsylvania law. The ACLU of Pennsylvania called this death, quote, a senseless tragedy, end of quote. They also stated the following, quote, police violence against people of color is a symptom of our country's inability to come to grips with how racial inequality poisons life in America for black and brown people. 25 to 50% of all police killings involve people with disabilities. Bozazi's death is another example of how police acting as first responders for people who are in the midst of a mental crisis can turn tragic. We need mental health professionals to be the first responders to people who are having health crises, not police. The State College Police Department also owes full disclosure on how its officers are trained to respond to calls about people with mental disabilities. The tragedy of police violence in America will end only when public officials take it seriously. It's time for the epidemic of Americans being killed by police who are supposed to protect and serve to stop. End of quote. The hope of the Black Political Empowerment Project is to review. We're asking every police department to review their policies and procedures with regard to how police officers interface with people with mental disabilities, possibly in partnership with key mental health facilities. There have also been high-profile cases of police officers shooting and wounding people with autism. An Aspinwall police officer, Scott Bailey, who has 2 sons with the autism spectrum, has helped produce an instructional video to help police officers learn to identify and appropriately deal with people with autism. There's also been an effort to get stickers for one's car and front door and possibly a voluntary autism identification card. BPEP advocates that such information be shared with all area police departments to help avoid unnecessary interactions between the police and citizens with autism. Number 7, for the past few years, the Black Political Empowerment Project has advocated for what we have called the Due Process Act. With the ongoing mixed reactions to how the local district attorney's office prosecuted Michael Rosfield, the Michael Rosfield case, interest has been reignited to consider the idea of having some form of an independent prosecutor in cases when a police officer is accused of killing a private citizen. BPEP continues to advocate for such cases to automatically be placed under the jurisdiction of the State Attorney General's office for purposes of overseeing the investigation and possibly prosecution of these cases. The details of the proposed Due Process Act are here in this room and attached to our full statement. 8, lastly, the fact that former East Pittsburgh officer Michael Rosfield was not convicted of even an involuntary manslaughter in the death of Antoine Michael Rose II. It has caused many people to question the law that apparently allowed no conviction in this case, and the need to seriously review that law and to pursue a revision of the law which would provide citizens with a more balanced opportunity for justice. In our opinion, at this time, quote-unquote, justice is not blind when it comes to a police officer being accused of killing a private citizen. In the Pennsylvania use of force law enforcement, it states that, quote, he is justified, he being a he or she, he is justified in the use of force when he believes to be necessary to effect the arrest and of any force which he believes to be necessary to defend himself or another from bodily harm while making the arrest. However, he is justified in using deadly force only when he believes that such force is necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury to himself or another person, or when he believes both, that such force is necessary to prevent the arrest from being defeated by resistance or escape, and the person to be arrested has committed or attempted to forcible felony, or is attempting to escape and possess a deadly weapon, or otherwise indicates that he will endanger human life or inflict serious bodily injury unless arrested without delay. End of quote. Its position of the Black Political Empowerment Project that this law provides far too much cover for a police officer who does not respect the awesome power that he has to take a life. And that power is awesome. It has to be respected. We support those legislators who are now attempting to advocate for a change in the law which dictates the use of deadly force. We laud Pennsylvania State Representative Summer Lee and Pennsylvania State Representative Ed Gainey for introducing legislation which attempts to deal with this imbalance. We're also appreciative of their efforts, along with Brandy Fisher of the Alliance for Police Accountability, Fallon Walker of Montgomery of Take Action Mon Valley, in scheduling lobbying efforts in Harrisburg on Tuesday, April 23rd. And I expect to join them. Some of us, I'm sure, will be as well. We encourage as many people to attend. We also are appreciative of the efforts of Mayor Bill Peduto to arrange with support from foundation community to provide buses to go to Harrisburg on Tuesday, April 30th to advocate for change. That is a very detailed list because we've been dealing with it for years and dealing with it certainly over a period of the last 3/4 of a year at another level. You see over here, I brought this picture for a purpose. If you look at the picture of these two young people, the passion of the picture speaks. Once again, no justice. I don't want to see any more pictures like that. There's a picture I was attempting to find of the mother. The passion on her face cries out for justice, cries out for change. We will be sending our detailed listing of suggestions in the form that I just read. Some police officials and political leaders have received some of these in part. We will be sending this entire document to area police officials and public officials to review. Even though some of them have begun to work on these, we want to make sure they have it all in one place and that they move expeditiously to put these moves and proposed actions into place. Beth Pittenger has been my partner and I hers on working on the You and the Police brochure. She has an update on what we're trying to do with that, and we thank her for her leadership and using her financial facilities and resources to print these documents.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, everybody. Appreciate everybody coming back 6 days later. And the update that we have on the You and the Police brochure is that 10,000 were distributed last week. We will receive another 10,000 printed copies by midweek. So we'll be redistributing those, including to the schools. We have a tremendous partnership with the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers and with the various police departments and the sheriff who was here with us last week to continue pursuing a rigorous effort to provide this information to students particularly, and also to create a testing mechanism that will assure that they've had to diligently study the information. And hopefully, I believe, as you said last week, the intent is to save lives. And stranger danger is very, very real. And if we can do anything to cut into that process that ends up with people being hurt, whether it's a civilian, a young person, an old person, a police officer, then we've certainly met our goal. Tim mentioned about the difficulty and the issue of police dealing with people with known or unknown mental illness and the many, many deaths that have resulted as a result of an encounter between police and an individual in a crisis. That has been a significant issue here in our region. And back around 2002, the City of Pittsburgh Bureau of Police accepted and implemented a federal grant to create a crisis intervention team, which required the development of a very rigorous curriculum of training One of our board members, Ms. Karen McClellan, was the person responsible for developing that in the city. She has since retired, of course, and she sits on our board. But back on March 26th at Penn State, there was a large symposium on crisis intervention training. And it included police officials as well as attorneys and solicitors for various municipal groups. And where it's been organized into a fashion that's distributed now, and hopefully will become a enhanced required certification course for police officers through the Municipal Police Officers Education and Training Commission, which of course issues the certifications. I also wanted to comment that the issue of special prosecutors for a officer-involved death has a tremendous value when it comes to transparency and to assure the public that there is no conflict of interest between a prosecutor and the officers involved in the arrest and the prosecution of a case. It is noteworthy that District Attorney Zappala did support that measure, Tim. Remember, we received a letter from him where he agreed that that would be an okay idea with him, provided that both investigation and prosecution were conducted by an independent entity. And we continue to support that effort. And on behalf of the Citizen Police Review Board, I congratulate and thank DPEP, PIN. Our various engagements have been very, very fruitful, and I think our mutual common goals have been pursued in a common fashion. And Tim, you have been a fantastic partner, and I appreciate everything in your facilitation of these agenda items that you reported today. We do have one other comment about the countywide Citizen Police Review Board. It's no secret that the city's CPRB has an opinion about that, and we would encourage that the policymakers recognize the work done by some very dedicated civilians and law enforcement professionals who have served on that board over the last 21 years, and that their capacity be expanded to permit their involvement and their recognition as the preeminent resource for police accountability in our region. As it is now, we do direct individuals to their particular municipal officials who they would more appropriately file a complaint of police conduct with, since they are in the city of Pittsburgh. That is our limited jurisdiction. But we do have a network where we can refer people to the appropriate elected or administrative office in their municipality. And I can't miss the opportunity to reinforce the quality of policing in any municipality is the direct responsibility of those elected in that municipality. We too often see where police accountability runs amok, and we have efforts like this where the community is full of questions, dissatisfied, and it becomes everyone else's problem. Go back to your local electeds and demand a change. But if we are to develop a responsible network of police accountability resources, the Citizen Police Review Board in the city of Pittsburgh extends its services and stand ready to assist. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Beth. Beth Pittenger, the Director of the Citizen Police Review Board for Pittsburgh. You're speaking on behalf of the branch. First Vice President Johnny Myatt of the NAACP Pittsburgh Unit. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, folks. I'm happy to be here because I realize that the NAACP or the DPEP, no one can do this alone. I believe that Black Lives Matters, but all lives matter. And when we can get this information out to the total community, whether it's police, churches, or other organizations, this is very important that this information that's being provided to us today is very well available to all of them. I pray and hope that we will all be of one accord on making sure that this Antoine Rose death will not be in vain, but we will be able to learn from it. We'll be able to increase our knowledge and to be able to come to grips with these things, particularly with the high school kids from all over the United States have problems with this. And we know that this can be a catalyst for us to move this all over the United States to make sure it happens. Thank you.
Carol Balance, Chair of the Penn Task Force on Safety, Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network. Carol Balance.
Thank you, Tim. To reiterate what some other folks said, you have been a great partner and leader on this issue. And we're already busy distributing the You and the Police brochure. And we are already quite committed to expanding a citizen police review board to the county level. And we're working with DeWitt Walton and Paul Klein and Khalid Rahim, anybody else who wants to get the Independent Citizen Police Review Board countywide. We have over 100 small police departments, and they just don't have the resources. But we need for everyone countywide to feel safe and to be able to hold all those police accountable.
Thank you. Before we bring up Melvin Hubbard Ill, who represents Ed Gainey's office, I want to refer back to this picture. This young man, who many of you saw leading a lot of the protests, Christian Carter, he's only 18. He's just a year older than was Antoine. And the pain in his face when there was no verdict of guilt speaks volumes. Speaks volumes. We don't want our young people to feel there's no justice in the justice system. This stuff has to be fixed. As I said earlier, this is the time where every municipality, every borough, every city has the opportunity to review these options and other options that they can create themselves to make things better for years and years to come. Melvin Hubbard Ill.
So good morning, everyone. I guess I'm speaking to myself here. Good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning. Good morning. I noticed that.
First, I want to thank Tim Stevens on behalf of State Representative Ed Gainey for inviting us here today and reaching out to us to have us be a part of this today. I want to say this. I wear this butterfly on my collar. It's the butterfly of hope, which is a symbol of the Highmark Caring Place, which is down on Stanley Street, downtown Pittsburgh. And the reason I wear this is because this organization helps families with the grieving process who've lost loved ones to instant death. And I think in the case when the mother loses a son, or father loses a son, or uncle loses a nephew, there's a place you need to go to help for healing, and I try to support what they do. I'm so glad to be able to talk about the co-sponsorship of State Representative Summer Lee and also State Representative Ed Gainey called Law Enforcement Deadly Use of Force. I'm going to read a little bit from it. You have this in your information, but I want to point out a couple of things from it. This was posted on March 29th, 2019. All House members from Representative Summer Lee and Representative Ed Gainey. Law Enforcement Deadly Use of Force. On June 19, 2018, 17-year-old Antoine Rose II was shot in the back and killed by East Pittsburgh police officer Michael Roosevelt. He was unarmed, afraid, and fleeing. Despite the clear facts of the case, the officer was acquitted of the murder charge in a ruling that exposed a major flaw in the Pennsylvania police use of force law. Under current Title 18, current law Title 18, which you have in your package, which Tim did allude to, an officer can deploy deadly force on a fleeing person who possesses a deadly weapon, whether or not that person indicates a threat to life or a desire to inflict a serious bodily harm. This can lead to death for possessing a firearm without any intent to use it at all. Additionally, the mere fear of a weapon has resulted in the murder of civilians who are unarmed. Summer Lee and Ed Gainey goes on to say, our legislation seeks to eliminate effectuating an arrest as a justification for the use of deadly force. Instead, our proposal would mandate that de-escalation and non-lethal force options be exhausted prior to legal force being deployed, and that legal force only be used and justified to prevent imminent threat to life. They go on to say, our police officers must be able to exercise restraint and good judgment as they are tasked and sworn to protect and serve the people. Providing proper training, which was talked about today, instituting morally sound legislation, which they're trying to do with this piece of legislation, and shifting the approach from aggressive and fear-based policing to life preservation and de-escalation of threats will elevate the professional conduct of officers, decrease the amount of injury and loss of life, and provide a mechanism for justice in the event of unnecessary use of force. So they're asking, please join me, her colleagues, in supporting this vital legislation as we improve professional standards while improving the safety of our communities and upholding equity and justice for all. Just to reinforce, this legislation is in infancy stages right now, but it's something that's going to come to bear, I really do believe. And I think that Summer Lee and Ed Gainey and people in Harrisburg is going to get this one right. But we need your help. We need your support. We need you to make sure that you tell your elected officials this is important to you, and this needs to come to pass. And also, as we said earlier, April 30th, it's going to be a Youth Day in Harrisburg. We need to go up and support these young people. Once again, thank you for having us here, Tim.
Absolutely, thank you.
And it's a pleasure to always come together in the process, not only spreading love, but doing something that's right for justice.
I wanted to acknowledge, she doesn't want to share any thoughts, but the president of Black Women for Positive Change, Diane Powell, has been a partner for our anti-violence work, who's present with us. Did I miss anything? Ceasefire, PA, do you have any quick comments? I know you're not feeling
Not
too
that anyone
well.
else hasn't.
Okay, Rob Conroy, want to acknowledge from Ceasefire, is also part of BPEP and Coalition Against Violence. Will, did we miss anything? In good shape. So, any questions? This is, as I said, so it took a while to put all this together, as you can imagine, going through my notes and records. But we will be sending this out to, as I said, area political and police leaders to review in detail and to move along. One of the suggestions did come up from last week, one from the sheriff, and we will follow up, will we not? With Sheriff Mullen was the possibility of using his bully pulpit to help move along the use of our new brochure in other departments, and that become part of maybe the training,
We love that.
right? Of all police area departments and police officers, that would be very helpful. And my hope is, again, that every department will require their officers to read, sign off, and take the quiz that they have actually read and understand what they're reading. So when they interact with a child on the street, or an adult for that matter, who's read the brochure, we will all be on the same page. Thank you very much. We have work to do, but we planted some seeds. Some of them are beginning to flourish, and we have more seeds to plant.
Yes, we did.
We thank our partners for being with us, and the work continues.
Hey, Tim, on 4, you're asking for Pittsburgh Police to provide some bias training.
Implicit bias.
Implicit
We don't want the
bias.
bias training.
Yeah, implicit bias.
We have enough.
Yeah, we have. You know, in respect to that, Tim, is Pittsburgh
Yes.
is Pittsburgh doing it? I mean, are they succeeding? Are they succeeding?
Absolutely.
Can you elaborate on that?
Pittsburgh has been only one of 6 cities in the country. We have to give them credit. Actually, I think what happened, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Beth. I think what happened when the Jordan Miles case occurred on January 12, 2010, some of us walked with the kids from Kappa on the 26th of January to the City Council for the press conference at 9:30, and we went into council at 10 with an interracial team of students. And that afternoon, Ricky Burgess, Reverend Burgess, called and said, because of what you did today, particularly because of what the kids said, I think I said this last week, he was willing to partner with us on police reform legislation. I think because of what began to happen around that time and the partnership of the leadership of the police bureau here in Pittsburgh, I think that Barack Obama's administration saw what was beginning to happen in Pittsburgh, that people were trying to work together to build bridges. And Pittsburgh was selected as one of the 6 cities for a new initiative with regard to improving police accountability and improving community police relations. Unfortunately, that cycle has just ended recently, but the city is committed to continue. The implicit bias training, again, assures that every police officer in Pittsburgh has that training. And the mayor corrected me some months ago So not only the police officer, but every employee of the city of Pittsburgh has to take implicit bias training. So if we can extend that model into other departments, because let's be honest, a lot of these departments have officers who don't have a lot of sensitivity, history, or knowledge of people of color. And that has to change. And this is an opportunity to do so.
Tim,
Yes?
they also, as part of the national initiative, they also focus on developing police-specific training, which was done up at University of Chicago, but it dealt with implicit bias, procedural justice, which all the officers were retrained in, and methods of community reconciliation. And the city of Pittsburgh does have posted on their website a full report of the National Initiative, Department of Justice National Initiative. It does have the last report from the city of Pittsburgh, which outlines the progress and success of the Bureau's participation in that project. Huge difference, though, in terms of their cultural focus in community policing.
And sure. Diane Powell, Black Women for Positive Change.
Yes, I'd just like to add that at the suggestion of the Department of Public Safety, Black Women for Positive Change began to go to outlying areas and work with city police officers to provide implicit bias training in outlying districts such as Rankin, Braddock, Duquesne. We had a very successful seminar there. The public was actively engaged in the process and appreciated the overture of letting the training be available to citizens outside of the city of Pittsburgh. So we're actively working to continue that focus and to offer it in areas outside of the city of Pittsburgh. Pin Hills was another area where we did it, and it was very widely received. So implicit training is on the move in the outlying districts, and there's cooperation between the city of Pittsburgh and outlying districts.
We want to remind the public as well, as we finish, that the tragedy with Antoine Michael Rose II occurred in East Pittsburgh at the hands of now a defunct police department. It was not the city of Pittsburgh, who has been making Herculean efforts in recent years to try and improve how they operate, how they interact with the public, and vice versa. Just want to be clear about that. This is just over the last half year or so, various communications the BPEP has had with the mayor, the county exec, the governor, Attorney General Shapiro, the police chiefs, and everything on the efforts that we've shared today. So that effort has been quite, in some degree of detail, but that's how we get things done and must continue. Thank you very much. Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
of all of the recommendations that you outlined today,
Uh-huh.
and considering that you view this as an opportunity to advocate for those changes, which are you going to be prioritizing, or which do you see really getting the most traction from the outset?
Well, our number one, give me that back. The good thing is, one has already begun, which we listed in our number one, has occurred, is beginning to occur, I'd say, at an active level, and that is the issuing of the new brochure and the distribution thereof, and the commitments of major departments to accept that request of reading, signing off, and taking the quiz. The next step that we have initiated as a result of Rico Martelli, who's in the audience today, we took his suggestion, and you weren't here when I mentioned that the letter has been sent to Superintendent last night, Hamlet, to move on that request that there be training of our students to the social studies classes. And we're, again, suggesting that that be emulated throughout the school systems in the area. I think we can save some negative interactions between the community and police, and maybe even literally save some lives with the use of that relatively simple brochure. We've expanded it to 8 panels. I think it was 6. It is now, and we've included. So that's one that's beginning to move into action.
And what's in the brochure? Why is it so important from your
Well, it's
perspective?
simple. We have an anti-violence document. It's 142 pages, 800 plus strategies impacting violence. This is 4 panels that anyone can pick up and read. It's detailed, but it's only four panels. And this little document can save lives. It tells people what to do when stopped by the police. For instance, when you're stopped, if you're driving, put your hands on the wheel, put your hand on the side of the car, be respectful, even if the officer may not be respectful. You be respectful. When it's night, turn the light on and the ceiling light on so that the officers can see you're not trying to conceal anything. You may want to ask if your license and registration is in your glove compartment or somewhere else so they don't think you're reaching for a gun. May I reach for or ask them, do you want to get it? It's in there. Whatever. We want people to leave alive. We don't want kids to run from the police. And I know at times that may be your natural reaction or one's natural reaction. It just causes too many incidents across the nation. So it's just practical information, rights, reality, and responsibilities. You may have the right to call a police officer by name out of his or her name, but it may not be a good thing to do in terms of reality, because people do respond to name calling, including officers and just regular folks in the street. So we're asking you to, if kids really read this, and adults, put it in their brain, use it, I think we'll eliminate some problems. And then again, with the police reading the same information, we're on the same page. One of the things that I think is extremely important, this is an uphill battle, that's why it's important that Melvin Hubbard Ill is here with us today representing State Representative Ed Gainey and the effort that he and Summer Lee are taking on. When you read the law, it is extremely in favor of, it favors the police officer to a point where almost all he or she has to say is, I thought my life was in danger, or I thought my life and the community's life was in danger, so I can just shoot people. And it's almost that simple, and it leaves a whole lot of room for just too much room. And a regular citizen has an extremely difficult chance of having his or her life mean something in terms of an officer who misused his or her awesome authority. To have the opportunity for them to be convicted of something. I was at the trial every day, not the whole day every day. Last day I was there till closing. I can tell from sitting there, I believe the great majority of people, if not all, would have been not happy, but would have been, the reaction was found guilty of something.
Yeah, he should.
And the fact that he was found guilty of nothing seemed like this kid's life meant nothing. And this young man who's in this picture, who's only 18, pouring his heart out in that picture. I don't want young people to feel like their life doesn't mean anything. I don't want an adult to feel their life doesn't mean anything. But our kids need to have hope and need to have faith in the police department, have faith in this country, that their life means something.
I just want to say one thing.
Billy Joe Jordan from the
Billy
NACP,
Joe.
third vice president.
Third Vice President of the NACP. There is no law need to be changed. It is because he's a black teenager. It was a cold-blooded murder. Had it been a white teenager, the same way, they looked at it completely different. That law didn't apply in this case. It was not imminent danger to this policeman. It was not imminent danger to the community. There was no danger. This was cold-blooded murder. They looked at it differently when it comes to black. You're changing laws. There's no need to change the law. This is clearly, by that video, it was cold-blooded murder. When he got shot on Tina, 3 times he shot him. There's no need to change the law. I know they're changing the law, that's good, but there's no need for it. The reason is because he's black.
You're saying you shouldn't have it.
It shouldn't. You shouldn't have to need. They're changing enforcement because he's a black kid. A white. I'm not racist or anything, but a white kid have been looked at it completely different. They've not looked at it that way. That jury would have found that policeman guilty of something, manslaughter or something. It shouldn't have to be a need to change any laws because the law's already there. They just and then the application of the law is wrong. because they was not, there was no danger to that person's life. That's all I have to say. They shouldn't have to change the law for that. That was cold-blooded murder.
Tim, can I say
Yes.
something?
And the passion, as you can see, remains from that. The first several days after the verdict, I personally was emotionally devastated. Everybody I ran into seemed like they were devastated. And it still remains a difficult decision to get our arms and hands around and our understanding. As I said in my statement, it's like you can't believe your lying eyes.
Mhm.
This man was standing behind a car, behind his vehicle. Antoine was yards and yards away. He was not in danger. And for this case to get no justice, as people standing here define justice, it's just wrong. That's why all this has to happen, and it needs to be, you mentioned priority. They need to look at it all and move on it. They need to implement the whole package as soon as possible.
And we have to be wary of what federal standards are. You were right. But the federal standard in determining whether or not the force was reasonable is to be judged from a similarly situated police officer's judgment, not from a reasonable person's perspective. And that pretty much assures the biases in the system towards what that officer alleges his or her perception of the situation was, what was in their mind, and then that being judged by a reasonable officer, not a reasonable person. And that's why we see a lot of these cases end up the way they do, with the community so frustrated, and leaving only one outcome there, only one conclusion, that it had something to do with other than the facts of the case, and might have been centered on the race of the individuals involved. But that's very, very important that we recognize the reasonable officer versus the reasonable person standard, and that's a problem.
Harvey Adams, these gentlemen represent the NAACP. I'm a lifetime member, a Gold Life member, and former president. Harvey Adams was president of the branch for, I believe, 16 years. And I came in 2 years after he left as president. And he was actually my police affairs chair after he was no longer president. He was a police sergeant for many years. Some people may remember. And I always remember, he used to get so upset when police officers would use this phrase, "I thought my life was in danger." And he's been dead for several years. But that has always stayed in my mind. There is too much room in favor of the police officer. We know the police have a very difficult job. I've said in city council on a few occasions, for no money would I be a police officer. Let's be honest. I don't know when I leave home if I'm going to get home or not, but that could be anything. Get hit by a bus. A police officer, when he or she leaves that morning or whenever their shift begins, they don't know if they're going to come back because of different reasons, of the safety issue. However, along with that comes serious responsibility of the awesome power that a police officer carries. They carry the right to arrest. They have a baton, possibly, handcuffs, mace, the gun. They have the power to shoot you and possibly kill you. And we know that when it goes to court, that's why the Due Process Act, which is one of the priorities, I would say, to your question, if you have to prioritize. Some people feel that the case could have been prosecuted more strongly. Some people feel that a witness on safety or the use of force, independent from the one that they normally use by the police department, that was the one used by the defense or the defense. There are questions if this case could have been prosecuted more intently. What we don't want to have is people in the local municipalities, such as in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, feel that the officers, the DA, who must depend on a daily basis on local police, they must. The reason why we developed the concept of the Due Process Act is because there's an inherent conflict. The DA has to depend on a daily basis on officers who he or she may tomorrow have to prosecute. And the day after have to depend on again for other cases. So there may be an inherent, it may not even be conscious of maybe not going that extra step to really prosecute a case and get that victory for the public. That's why the Due Process Act is so important. And Carol Balance has been our partner in Penn for some time on this subject. We as citizens should have to have the right to feel like justice is literally justice for everybody
Saying that, Tim,
in a fair fashion. The system is not fair. When you come to court, the judge by nature is probably leans toward the police officer because again, the judge is dealing with officers all the time. The jury, because the jury feels what I just stated, they know that an officer has such a difficult job and a dangerous job on a daily basis. They have a certain, they're going to give the officers some room because of the danger of their job. The last person on the totem pole is a citizen who may have been killed by the police. So the whole system is lopsided in the direction of the police officer. That's why this effort to look at this law and see if there's a way to make it more palatable to the average citizen and more protective of the average citizen is so important. It really is. It really is.
Can we talk about the special prosecutor that you were mentioning? Like,
Yeah.
what does the process look like to get that, and who's picking this man or woman to be the?
It would be how we wrote it was, and we're open to suggestions. We just need something to happen that's different. Our proposal was that when there's a death at the hands of the police, it immediately goes under the jurisdiction of the Attorney General's Office of Pennsylvania. Also, in terms of follow-up prosecution, if that's required or chosen to be, it may be more independent if investigators come in from other areas. Obviously, in the initial piece, the local police have to deal with the situation because it's going to take a while, even if this is passed, for state people to come in or folks representing the Attorney General's office to come in from another county or whatever to investigate. But what we're looking for is putting into the system as much independence and objectivity as possible. Obviously, whenever you have officers involved, by nature, they have a leaning toward other officers, I would assume. But at least if we can get some distance from the locality, our hope is and our theory is that you would have more objectivity on the officers who are investigating and possibly prosecuting. And the attorneys who prosecute are not being elected by local citizens and not having to deal with the police and a local municipality or county on a regular basis. Does that make sense?
You mentioned that local departments have been accepting the brochure and agreeing to test officers on that. How many departments within Allegheny County?
What we've gotten, as you missed last week, is the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, which is obviously the largest one in the area, has agreed to read, sign off, and take the quiz. They're going to create the quiz for area police departments. Allegheny County Police have agreed to do the same. Port Authority Police has agreed to do the same. Wilkinsburg Police has agreed to do the same. We're waiting for, even though Chief Brown was here in the press conference Tuesday, he's waiting for confirmation on acceptance of our request. So the letter I sent to Superintendent Hamlet last night, along with the brochure, along with our statement from last week, we hope will produce results. And Sheriff Mullen mentioned again that this is something maybe could be pursued by other jurisdictions, working with other police departments to make this become not law, but become commonplace and a common practice.
And he distributed it to his deputies.
He distributed to already? Beth said he's already distributed the brochure to his deputies
Okay, so
and the chief and the sheriff's department.
it sounds like, well,
There's
I mean, I
movement.
guess I'll ask eventually, will you start to reach out to municipal forces, smaller municipal?
Yeah, what we're doing, if you saw in my statement, we met November 4th, no, that was a different meeting. We met this past summer with the president of the Police Chiefs of Western Pennsylvania, Police Chiefs Association of Allegheny County, through Coleman McDonough set that up, who is the police superintendent. So again, as a result of this press conference, we'll be setting all this out, and hopefully there'll be some movement on at least accepting some of these suggestions. And maybe one of the simplest ones is to start with that brochure and the commitment of every officer to read, sign off, and take the quiz that's being prepared by the City of Pittsburgh Police Department, Police Bureau.
And then I had a question for Beth.
Yes, Beth.
Regarding the idea of empowering the Pittsburgh Citizen Police Review Board to conduct investigations at other municipal departments. Where does that idea stand in terms of becoming a reality?
Well, that's solely in the hands of Allegheny County Council. They have been, I believe they subjected it to a special committee for review, so it's in their hands. The reality is that Allegheny County Chief Executive, who's the chief administrative person in the county, has jurisdiction and control over one police department directly, and that is Allegheny County Police Department. Indirectly, through authorities, Port Authority, but when you have 105 police departments, each responsible to their own municipality, because that's the way Pennsylvania statute organizes municipalities. They have self-determination and autonomy. And if they're empowered to have a police department, then it's solely under their control, not under the county control. So the ability to subject all of those departments to independent police review, it's not there unless the particular municipality wishes to voluntarily submit to it, in which case having an entity. Now, it might be in our interest as a county to have a centralized police resource center in lieu of this countywide police review board. That may be a clearinghouse for information, best practices, referrals. I know that the independent board in the city of Pittsburgh has put itself out there. They will do anything to support anything that promotes police accountability. And they are certainly, considering options themselves, but we're limited because of our jurisdiction, and we're empowered by the Home Rule Charter of the City of Pittsburgh. So we're limited. But we do offer our support to outlying municipalities. We've talked to some, provided information to others, assisted them in their deliberations related to developing their own local review. I mean, one example would be if the Citizen Police Review Board of the City of Pittsburgh could conduct investigations and turn over the product of that investigation to a locally appointed panel of 3 or 5 people, and they can deliberate on it, and they can make a recommendation to their electeds and their chief of police, which keeps it local, because policing is a local matter. So, we stand ready to assist and support whatever we can do for the good of the police accountability, but right now, it is in the hands of the county council, and we've talked to them twice.
And how many municipalities have you worked with?
Probably 5, where they've been seriously looking for information. And also outside of Allegheny County, outside of the city, outside of Allegheny County, we've assisted people, groups with an interest of developing some kind of oversight. And we participate in the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, which gives us access and allows us to contribute to national practices.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much. Hope we've covered it. We got work to do, but we got roots have been planted. Thank you, sir. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.